Hey, what's up in there, guys? Brian here, the 3 Topics Gamer, here to share with you another one of my worst best ranking videos to share with you guys today. This time I'll be doing my own personal ranking of all 5 of the primary officially released Resident Evil CGI films. Now, I technically have done a worst best ranking of all of the live action and perhaps CGI films, but this one is just going to focus solely on the CGI films. And as it stands right now, as I stated, I think there are currently 5 of them, with one having been released recently. So if you have enjoyed this ranking by the end, please do not forget to like, share, and subscribe. Keep track of me in all my future videos. And remember, guys, if you guys have any ideas for future rankings or reviews or discussion videos that you want me to go over, or heck, reactions, let me know in the comments below, and I will try to get it as soon as I can. And before I start, I just want to give a major shout out to this viewer who sent in this idea, so give yourself a pat on the back, because this video would not exist without your request. So, starting off with what I consider to be my least favorite entry out of these 5 primary Resident Evil CGI films. Okay, starting off with my least favorite Resident Evil CGI film, it has to go to Resident Evil Infinite Darkness. Now, before I start, I just want to put a quick disclaimer that if this image looks a little different from the next 4, it is simply because I'm actually filming this the day that I'm actually going to upload this video, while the other 4 parts were recorded yesterday. Now, my original reason I put Infinite Darkness last is because I went on this whole, 3-minute rant explaining why I literally could not remember anything about this film, literally anything about this film. Now, it wasn't until I was done filming that I looked at some images and I realized, oh my god, this stars Leon and Claire. So I was thinking, okay, I'm kind of pissed off even more, because how do you have Leon and Claire as your main leads, yet I literally cannot remember anything that happens in it. So today, literally 15 minutes ago, I actually rewatched Resident Evil Infinite Darkness. And now I remember why I didn't remember anything about this film, or technically this 4-part 25-minute series, is because nothing really happens to the last third. And then even when you get to the last part of this 4-part series, it's almost a complete retread of the last battle in Resident Evil Degeneration. So not only is this series forgettable and nothing really happens to the 4th part, but when you get to the 4th part, it pretty much copies the majority of that fight from really a film that I really liked in Degeneration. So I felt it was cheap. So it's boring, cheap, and you managed to make my 2 favorite Resident Evil characters in the forms of Leon and Claire look kind of bad. So that's why I'm kind of pissed off at this film, which is why I'm kind of happy now that I can confirm officially that Resident Evil Infinite Darkness is by far my least favorite Resident Evil CGI film to date. Taking the number 4 spot on my list is going to have to go to the most recent Resident Evil CGI film, in the form of Resident Evil Death Island. Now, I'll openly say this, I didn't really like this film. Yeah, this was not very fun for me. Now, timeline-wise, this is supposed to take place between the events of Resident Evil 6 and 7 in 2015. Here's the problem I have with this film. I think this film, for me, felt like a fan film. This is the type of film that a fan who just wants to make some crazy over-the-top story would write, because there's a number of elements about this film that just didn't really work for me. I think adding so many key characters in one film kind of hurts the film, because it takes any sort of suspense out. You know for a fact that they're not going to kill any of them, so none of them are in any danger. And at this point in their lives, I have so much experience that there's really nothing that they could have encountered that's going to really rattle them or scare them, or that they can't handle. So whatever type of creatures that they showed off in this film was nothing that I think they could handle. Okay, so some sort of mutated liquor shows up. So what? These guys have killed things worse. Then some giant monster shows up at the end. These guys have killed worse things than that. So there's no sense of suspense. But here's the worst thing I hated about this film, without question. This is easily in the top 5 most hated Resident Evil ideas that I've ever encountered in my entire time as a fan of the franchise. Why in God's name did they introduce Remake Jill into the primary storyline? Now, I'm very much under the impression that there are currently 2 different timelines going on. You have the main series of games, and then you have the remake timeline, which is kind of an alternate timeline. They inserted Resident Evil 3 Remake Jill in the primary storyline, and they didn't even have the guts to change her look. They literally copied and pasted her look from 1998 into 2015 as if no time had passed. And mind you, this is supposed to be the first time we have seen Jill in action since Resident Evil 5. at least in that game, they gave us two distinctive different looks for Jill Valentine. And we were like, okay, that's Jill Valentine. They gave her two different looks. It's fine. But they didn't even do that. They gave her the exact same model, and I thought that was really, really lazy. And on top of that, her interactions with some characters were a little bit weird. This is supposed to be like the first time that Jill has ever met Leon S. Kennedy, but the way they're acting with each other in scenes that they are together, it's as if they've known each other this entire time. I mean, when Chris and Leon had met each other for the first time in Resident Evil 6, it was kind of a big moment. Now, these two characters had known of each other, but they had never actually officially met. And I know for a fact that up until this point, there is no record of Jill and Leon ever meeting, so that just distracted me the entire time. Also, the primary villain's main evil plan was just dumb. It was dumb. This is another case of, well, who's the villain of the week this time around? And it doesn't work. It's stupid, it's ridiculous, it's no suspenseful. Sure, there's some fun little action here and there, but it's nothing that we haven't already seen before in the prior set of CGI films. And at this point, it's kind of one of those films where you try not to think much about it. You want to have fun with this film, and I understand that. But when they've already done this type of thing multiple times before in prior movies, you need to bring me something interesting. You need to bring me something new that allows it to stand out and be memorable. And unfortunately, there were just far more negative things about this film that I remember than things I actually enjoyed. Which is why, unfortunately, I didn't really like Resident Evil Death Island, and it has to take the number 4 spot on my list. Taking the number 3 spot, center of the stage, is going to have to go to Resident Evil Vendetta. This one was just okay. This is another primary Leon and Chris adventure once again. This time, they actually introduced Rebecca Chambers, who up to this point, we hadn't seen since Resident Evil 0, which she was always a character that I always felt was just kind of minor and not very important. So I thought it was okay that they did decide to bring her back and give her something to do. I thought that the primary villain this time around was definitely a little bit more interesting, and I do appreciate that in terms of action set pieces, we really get to see Chris and Leon at their absolute best and just how skilled they are as combatants. I would even say that this is, outside of the games, my favorite portrayal of Leon and Chris in terms of in actual action. I will give it that. I thought that some of the action scenes in this were kind of weird. I believe there was like this highway chase that Leon was on a bike killing these dogs and he was blowing up these cars, and I'm just thinking, Leon, are you realize you're killing civilians now, right? Like, it's like, we might want to be careful what we're doing here. But I thought the overall story for this one was just kind of okay. You know, leagues better than what we got in Death Island, but it just kind of fits. It's like, there's enough about this film where this is like the perfect amount of, they're trying to do something a little bit different. There are some interesting elements. It's a fun little watch. It's nothing special, but if you're someone who's just looking for something to watch for a good little over an hour, then I think it's harmless, which is why I placed it at the number 3 spot on my list. Taking the number 2 spot is going to have to go to the first of these like primary set of Resident Evil CGI films in the form of Resident Evil Degeneration. Now, this one really kind of kicked off this whole series of CGI films, as I stated earlier. And this one pretty much focuses on Leon and Claire teaming up for the first time since, I believe, Raccoon City, which I thought was actually pretty interesting. And we're actually going back to the use of the G-Virus, which was also pretty cool because I always thought the G-Virus was really one of my favorite uses of the virus, at least in the original set of BOW-style viruses. It was always really creepy. And ferociously dangerous too. I think that this film is kind of divided into 3 different areas in which we're kind of dealing with an outbreak in an airport, and then they call on Leon to kind of handle the situation, and then he teams up with Claire, and then they team up with this little unit who has a connection with the main villain, and the main villain is trying to get revenge for this corporate guy because he did something to screw him over. Like, it works for what it's trying to do. It was always nice. It was great seeing Leon and Claire team up again. I wish we could have seen it happen in another game. But overall, I do think this is a first good start, and it works, and it's fun. It's fun seeing Leon and Claire in action again, and I think that the last third of this film is really action-packed. It's a lot of fun. It's great. I really enjoyed it. I've seen it multiple times, and I do own it. It's still on DVD somewhere in my closet somewhere. And I you know, if I ever feel the need to, I might pop it out and watch it again. But overall, I really enjoyed this film, which is why I'll give it the number 2 spot on my list. Taking the number 1 spot in my favorite Resident Evil CGI film of all time has to go to Resident Evil Damnation. Now, this story actually focuses primarily on Leon, and I love that because Leon is without question my favorite character in Resident Evil. So to have a film focused solely on him, I thought was great. Now, they introduced Ada, but you know, that was, you know, that's pretty classic in Leon style games. Ada usually kind of shows up and has a little part to play, and I think she plays her role pretty well. And she has a pretty cool fight in this scene. What I really love about this particular movie is not only just has a pretty interesting story that actually connects in a very significant way to the story of the games, but we actually get to see the BOWs that we're familiar with being used in different ways that I wasn't really familiar with. And there's really so much attention to detail in terms of the action set pieces and moments in which Leon is actually fighting these monsters. I thought it was very, very creative. And the use that you have this person who actually has the ability to control BOWs has always been kind of the primary idea for Umbrella. To have this level of control was something that they had always wanted. So to see a character be able to pull it off and achieve that was really, really special. By far, my favorite scene in this film has to be the final battle in which you have, I'm not going to say who it is, but he's actually controlling like this legion of lickers and they're taking on a tyrant. And I thought, or you know, technically a variation of the tyrant class. And I'd never seen that before. We'd never actually seen BOWs directly engage other BOWs in a sense where they're allies instead of enemies, instead of just having two different enemies that just so happen to interact and they might fight each other. But to actually use them as allies and use them together alongside our primary hero was something I'd never seen before. And I thought it was amazing and awesome. It's something I really love. It's easily one of my top 5 favorite moments in not just Resident Evil CGI movie history, but Resident Evil history in general, including the games and even some of the live action films. I absolutely love that. And in fact, I would even say that this is probably my favorite Resident Evil film in general. Like, CGI films and live action. Because, openly, I actually do like Resident Evil's 1 and the second one. I do like those. I do like those films. But this one I like over all of them. So, not only is Resident Evil Damnation my favorite CGI Resident Evil film, but it's by far my favorite Resident Evil film of all time. Which is why it has to take the number 1 spot. And if you haven't seen this film by now, please check it out. It is absolutely worth your time if you haven't seen it by now. It really is. So that's my ranking of the 5 primary Resident Evil CGI films. Now, if you've seen all these films, how would you rank them and tell me why? Let me know in the comments down below. And like always, thank you guys for watching. You're awesome, and I'll see you all next time.